All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 5th session of Helping Your Parents Move. Today, we have the pleasure of Colin Sutherland. He is with Freedom 55 Financial. He's an old friend of mine and very, very experienced and knowledgeable in his field. And part of the challenge in helping our parents with the move is talking about the financial stuff and where they're at and where they need to be and do they have a plan, that sort of thing. So it is a very difficult conversation to be having with our parents. I know I don't really know much about my parent situation and I kind of feel like it's none of my business, but as our speaker will allude to today, it kind of is in a way. So I am going to let our speaker take it from here, and we're going to talk about some stuff, sort of how to talk to our parents about finances, planning for intergenerational wealth transfer, and protecting financial legacy. So because we've only got one couple, oh, there's more people. Excellent. Okay. Anyway, if there's any questions that come along, please let Callum know, and I will be putting his information in the chat. If you want to reach out to him afterwards, he'd be happy to answer any questions. Okay. Take it away, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Anna. You stole a little bit of my thunder on the intro, but that's fine. I just added one topic for the end where we can have a conversation about staying in your home, buying a new one, selling, renting, and what that might look like. So I'll talk about the talking to parents first, and then we'll move on to wealth transfer, protecting legacy, and maybe some ideas for you to think about. Please do not punish me and make me talk for 20 or 30 minutes without interaction. I've done nothing wrong to you at this point, so please don't do that. I love the virtual seminars and everything like that, but I need interaction, and I do miss that from regular times. So the conversation about talking to parents about finances. I read a book not too long ago, and I think it's absolutely crucial that the conversation takes place. So a couple steps that I'm going to recommend is, the main one is call a family meeting. Doing one-on-one is great, and it's certainly better than not doing anything at all. But we all take in information differently. A perfect example is vaccinations. We all have access to the same information, yet it appears society is split into 3 different groups of definitely want it, might want it, don't want it. So we all interpret information differently. If everyone is in the same room receiving that information, we now have the ability to clarify what's being told to us. If it's not clarified and someone passes away, it's now too late. And that's when fights and disputes happen, and money makes people do crazy things. I have a client, they're on year number 4 fighting for the inheritance from the parents, and they're fighting with a brother. And unfortunately, at this point, it totally looks like all the money is going to go to the lawyers.
Wow.
So in terms of the conversation, I think a great starter point for a conversation is to ask what happened when their parents passed away. What was that process like? What were the feelings involved there? What were the things that were talked about at that point in time? How easy was it? How hard was it? Unfortunately, fortunately, we don't go through this a lot. So 4 times maybe. So and then the conversation can be focused on what are the wishes of the parents? What do you want to see happen? Any desires? For example, are you someone who wants to stay in your personal home as long as you can? So you're more focused on in-home care, or you want long-term care? Are there concerns about enough money? Are you going to outlive your money, or is your money going to outlive you? In today's world, being as volatile it is, maybe there's concerns about the investments or where the money is. One question I think is very important is, how do the parents want things divided? And if they say they want them to be divided fairly, does that mean fair or equal? What I mean by that is, if one person lives in the same city as the parents, like my younger brother does with my family, he is going to be the one that has to do most of the work if their health goes downhill. So it's quite possible that fair to my parents might be leaving him more to compensate him for all the work he's going to have to do down the road. I don't want to predict bad things, but it's possible it could happen. So fair means two different things. Make sure that gets elaborated so everyone can hear it. The other one that might come up in terms of leaving stuff is leaving stuff to charities, and what type of charity what that could be. It could be revolving around pets, it could be cancer, whatever the case may be. The book I mentioned is called Willing Wisdom. It can do a much better job of
Willing wisdom. Okay, I'll put it in chat.
Thank you.
$25 on Amazon. It does a really, really good job about the conversation, and it helps you get through it. The one thing I wanted to point out as I'm speaking about this right now is, you'll happen to notice I never said ask how much your parents have in their bank account. So that it's not something you need to know. So yes, we're talking about money, but we're not talking about money. So hopefully that alleviates at least some of the tension. We don't need to know how many bank accounts they have and what the dollar amounts are in each one. And they're probably not going to tell you anyway. So the second step is to gather out all the information, where all the accounts are and where the policies are held. It's amazing how many different institutions can hold one person's information. So once you can track down and have access to all of that, the other thing you may want to do is walk through and make sure that any account that can have a named beneficiary has it, and make sure that the beneficiaries are correct. A note on this one that I've run into a few times: a power of attorney cannot change the beneficiary. So if it comes to a point where someone is incapacitated either mentally or and they can't speak for themselves, whatever the beneficiary is that's named at that time is staying. It cannot be changed. For anyone on the call that would like two documents, one is an annual estate plan checklist, and the other is a personal records organizer. And basically all the organizer does is takes all of your information, puts it into a document, and lets whoever needs to know exactly what and where you have it. So who holds your will, which bank accounts you have, where your investments are, where your life insurance policies are, maybe where the beneficiaries, mortgage, whatever the case may be. It allows you to have all that information in one spot. So if you either text me or email me your email address, I will be happy to send that to you. The other thing that might make your life easier is, I've heard this from several people, that they think diversification is holding different investments at different places. That's not necessarily the case. It may be beneficial to try and cut that down and move it to one or two places. I know the executor will find it much easier later on down the road. As far as if you are the executor, I also have a document I can send you for that just gives you some guidance as to what you can do and make some tips, and gives you some tips. There is new legislation in Ontario that allows the executive to be held more accountable. I'm not an expert on that yet, but I know it's putting a little bit more pressure. Most of us are not professional executors. We've not done it 15 or 20 times. At least I hope you haven't. There are services out there that can help the executor get through everything and make sure that everything is done properly. At Canada Life, they use a state at ease, and the price is about $500. It's very reasonable. And if you consider the fact that when you're an executor, you're probably also going through grief at that time, you really don't need the stress, or I wouldn't think you need the stress of trying to figure everything out. So I'm sure there's other companies that do it as well, but that's one avenue you can look at, just to, I would say, just to let people breathe. Do I have a, sorry, I see a question, so.
Yeah, do you want to answer it? So the question is, do you have any references for executors whose parents are living outside of Ontario?
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay. Can we find some?
I could.
Okay. We'll get back to you, Barb, on that.
As I scour my brain.
Yeah.
Maybe Lorenzo might know next week.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, they live in Manitoba. Okay. We'll get back to you on Barb on that for sure.
Any other questions as far as the initial conversation goes?
No, I'm good.
Don't be making it so easy on me, but that's okay.
We just have one daughter. It's easy.
So I'm going to switch to the planning for wealth transfer / protecting legacy. I just tied it into one because they sort of cross over. I'm not going to get into anything in detail because otherwise we'd be here way too long. The one thing I would say in terms of this is try to be aware of your biases and your emotions. They can get in the way. And I would say, if anything, try to make math-based decisions in a lot of this, because we do have biases against stuff we just don't even know we have until it comes up. So the other thing to be aware of is sometimes we make initial decisions, or we hear something and we do things, and it doesn't always have the intended consequences that we want it to have. And the example I'll give you is last week I was on a call about adding kids to the deed of the cottage. And some people think that's a way to reduce the tax bill or a way to reduce probate, and it doesn't always have the desired effect. And there are negatives that go with that, but that is something, before you do it, absolutely speak to an accountant and make sure that the reason you're doing it is what is going to actually happen. So the first thing I wanted to just mention, because I don't find that everyone knows this, is when someone passes away and you have investments, on the day you pass away, you're basically considered that those investments are sold. This is particularly important if you are the longer living spouse and the other spouse is predeceased to you, because now when it goes to your kids, it's going to be taxed. So I'll use RRSPs for an example. If someone has $200,000 in RRSPs or in a RIF on the day that they die, that is $200,000 that is taxed. So in your final year, you have to file a final tax return. If that final tax return plus your investments in RRSPs or RIF is over $220,000, you are taxed at 53.53% in Ontario.
Thanks.
Some people don't know it. It's something that taxes, I will say, cannot be eliminated, but it can be reduced. And there are things that can be put in place to do it. And really on that point, it's just awareness of, it doesn't take much for a final estate holding to be over $220,000, and 53.3% is a lot of tax.
Right. So could you, without going into too much detail, can you give us a couple of suggestions on what can be done, without going into too much detail?
Yeah, so at age 71, you have to convert your RRSP to your RIF. So the simple part of that is your RRSP is really for your accumulation and tax deferral. So the money that goes into an RRSP is not taxed until you take it out. So when it goes into a RIF, it starts to come out, and when it comes out, it's taxed. When it's inside of a RIF, the government has a minimum amount you have to take out. So at first year, it's around 5%.
Okay.
It is very common for people to only take out their minimum, which of course does to a certain extent reduce their tax bill in that year, but it might cause the tax bill down the road to be bigger. So you need to look at the whole picture.
Right.
So while there is a minimum to come out of your RIF, there is not a maximum. So sometimes it makes more sense to pull more out early to reduce the overall tax bill. And in some cases, it makes sense. I know in some cases, I've started taking RRSPs, the money out at age 65 because there's a lot of money in there, and we want to minimize the overall tax bill.
So it's really, really important to have someone working with you on this plan, because I'm assuming every situation is different. Everybody's got a different financial history, where they are currently, what they want to do in the future, children, all kinds of stuff. So this is really important to make sure you have a financial advisor that you work with, that you trust, because these are all things that need someone to guide you through. Barb's got another question. What about taking money out of your RRSP and put into a TFSA to reduce taxable income?
The questions are popping up. I'm seeing both. First one, absolutely great idea.
Okay.
So just make sure you understand the difference of the two, because the money that's been put into an RRSP, you get the tax deduction. So when it comes out, it gets taxed. The money you put into a TFSA, that money's already been taxed. So when it comes out of the TFSA, it's not taxed and it's not considered income. So two quick ideas. If you think your RRSP is going to be rather large and you still have money saving when you get into your late 50s or 60s, then switch it over and start putting it into your TFSA instead of your RRSP. That's not a one-size-fits-all recommendation. That's a possible thing you could do. And then the second part is, if you're looking at your overall tax bill and you want to take more money out early, but you still want to leave it invested, then you would put it into the TFSA. And then when you need that money down the road, you can pull it out.
Okay.
And inside of a TFSA, it doesn't get taxed at all. So.
Okay. What about LIRA?
Same concept. It's going to depend on what the specifics are in terms of how much you're allowed to take out.
What is LIRA?
Locked in retirement account. It typically comes from a pension that you've moved over.
Okay.
So, and that pension stuff can vary depending on province and where it was.
Okay.
Sometimes with the locked in, you can start taking out at age 55.
Okay.
Sometimes, not always.
Right. Okay. Great questions, guys. Keep them coming.
And thank you for making me not talk to myself. I love it. The second topic is probate. So if investments have a designated beneficiary like an RRSP or like a tax-free savings account, it does not go through probate, which is wonderful. There is a product called a segregated fund, which not everyone knows about. A segregated fund is essentially a mutual fund wrapped in insurance. So one of the things you could look at, especially if you have money that's invested in an open account, which means it's not registered, so it's not an RRSP, not a tax-free savings account. In a segregated fund, it has a designated beneficiary. So that money will go to the designated beneficiary and it does not go through probate.
Okay.
So if you do the math, if you have a lot of money in open investments, it can save you a fair bit on probate. The second thing I like about segregated funds it gets to the person fairly quickly because it's treated just like a death claim. So in terms of quickness and ease, in terms of that money going to the beneficiary, is very fast. And the third part, which this will surprise some people, with a segregated fund, because it doesn't go through probate, it is private. So once a will goes through probate in Ontario, it is public domain. You can access it. Anyone can access it. I don't know what the steps are to do that, and I don't know how complicated it is, but I know it's public domain. So a great example of this would be, I brought it up earlier, my brother's in Nova Scotia looking after my family. I'm here in Ottawa. My parents want to leave money to my brother, but they don't want to hurt my feelings. They can do that with a segregated fund. I'm never going to know the difference. I think that's more of a tip for parents not to hurt the kids' feelings, but it works. So,
There was another question. Any other suggestions when there is not contribution room for TFSA?
what are you trying to accomplish?
Good question.
So there's basically the three simple tax sheltered environments I know about that are easy to talk about. One is Rrsp, one is Tfsa, and then the other one, which is not as common and not as popular, is you can do it through insurance.
Okay.
But that's a much wider conversation. It's definitely not a one size fits all.
Okay. She's added in moving from Rrsp. I don't know if that helps your answer your question.
Once the TFSA is full, you're probably going to have to go into an open account.
Okay.
So just regular investments in a taxable environment. And then that what becomes important there is, what are you investing in, and making sure that the products that receive the better tax treatment are the ones that are in the open account. So a simple explanation there, I'll try to make it simple. A GIC collects interest. Interest is 100% taxable. So you want the GIC inside your RRSP or your tax-free savings account. And if you're buying stocks, you would want that in the open account because you have capital gains and you get a 50% reduction, and it's a better tax rate.
Okay. So all of the stuff that you're talking about today, Colin, is that Ontario specific or Canada specific? And I know I'm probably a silly question, but because some of our callers are not in Ontario.
A lot of it's Canada specific. Some of it is specifically the probate and around the wills is going to be Ontario.
Okay.
Your treatment for RRSPs and TFSAs and watching your overall taxable income, that's going to apply to all of Canada.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, great.
How are we doing for time?
We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
So the other one I touch on for 1 second is insurance. And this is one of the ones where I brought up the biases where some people have a visceral reaction to insurance. It's fine, I get it. It's not my favorite topic to talk about, but one of the things insurance can do for you though is equalization of the estate. And if you're planning ahead of time, and let's just pretend they have a cottage, you have a lot of investments, and you're going to have a high tax bill, sometimes investing in an insurance policy will cost you less money to pay off the tax bill. So once again, protect yourself against some biases and look at the math. One of the other things it can do, and I've heard this before, where parents go, I don't want to spend all my money because I want to leave it to the kids. Again, it's a tool where invest a little bit in insurance. There's the pot for the kids. Go have fun and spend the rest of your money.
Right.
That's a pretty popular one if they're not sure about how much money they're going to have left, or they don't want to spend it all. They do want to leave some. It's an easy way to do it. Once again, there's math involved, and the math can show you whether it's the right decision or the wrong decision. The other thing you can do with insurance is leave it to charities, which is number one, it's a feel good, but number two, it's also helps with taxes.
It's a win-win.
It can be. And the one thing I will bring up, and I say it to as many people as I can say it, when you die, your money is either going to go to taxes, your kids, or a charity. One of the three. Maybe it's all three, but unless you sit down and look at it, like I can almost say if you don't sit down and look at it, I know where most of it's going. And you can fill in the blank there. That being said, I'm not saying you're not going to pay taxes. You're going to pay taxes. It's just a matter of trying to reduce it.
Right. And that's very valuable information for people because we've all worked very hard for our money, and especially our parents. And it's nice to know how we can minimize that, for sure.
Yeah. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. I know it's cliche, but it's very, very true.
Yeah.
The other one, which is becoming more and more popular, is the concept of leaving a legacy and going, you know, when I leave this earth, what am I leaving? And I just talked about insurance. So that's one way to do it, where you can donate a sum of money to. I have one client that's got a policy, and the beneficiary is the National Arts Center. So there's different ways you can do it. There is also now a much easier way to set up an investment account, where that investment account pays out an annual type bursary or scholarship or donation to different charities. And it's become way easier to do, and it's also become less expensive to do. So it's pretty neat that you can leave this world and leave an impact after you're gone, and you don't have to be Jeff Bezos to do it.
And then that would be an ongoing bursary too, right? Every year.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So
That's awesome.
So that's as far as I want to go on transfer of wealth. There's the main concept or the main message is just there are things out there we can do, and to plan them and do the math before you cross it off your list and say don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
If any of them resonate with you, take it to your professional of choice and have them go through the math and see if it makes sense.
Right. But first and foremost, have that conversation with your family, right? It's a family affair, and decisions should be made and things to understand, because you're right. It's very sad when you hear about people spending a lot of money and time fighting over money. And that's kind of sad.
It's very sad, and something I forgot to mention earlier that can come up, and I don't want to speak to it too much because I'm not a wills and estate lawyer, but there are certain bills, like your final tax bill, there's a timeline on that. So if your estate gets tied up in probate because there is a dispute, that doesn't change that someone has to come up with that money to pay the tax bill.
Right.
So the conversation is important to prevent the fight, but the other part is the plan going, well, if something does happen and it's slow going through the probate process and that tax bill is big and someone has to pay it, where's that coming from?
Right. What's the sort of most common question you get from either people of the age of downsizing or their kids, sort of concerns or things they're dealing with that you're really helping people with?
Most of the concern right now is my money going to last and how much am I going to have? Okay,
because we're living longer, right?
So I want to live this lifestyle. Can I do it? Am I going to outlive my money?
Okay.
And we are living longer, and that's not going to change. It is going to change. It's going to get longer and longer and longer because
right.
Pretty soon we're going to be able to walk into a store and pick out our new hip and away we go. So.
Mm-hmm. So at what age should we be doing that math? You keep saying you got to do the math. What age should we be doing that math? 10 to 15 years out from retirement. Okay. 10 to 15 years out of retirement. Okay, I should probably book a session with you then.
It's it's easier to prepare going into it.
Right.
Going, look, this is what we're going to, I mean, I have wonderful software programs that tell me exactly what you're going to have at age 90 based on these assumptions.
Right.
So it's easy to predict what we're going to do going forward. So maybe when you sit down and make that plan at age 55 and you know you're going to be making $120,000 a year from now to age 65, maybe that's your warning sign that you know what, I don't want to put more in my RSPs right now. I want to do it someplace else, or maybe I do want to fill it up.
Right.
Because that's going to make my future look a little bit brighter.
Right.
The other thing that I didn't bring up, but which is I see a lot of mistakes being made. When do I take my CPP?
Okay.
And your income going forward, that makes a difference.
Okay.
The last topic I wanted to bring up was the buy, sell, rent, or buy a tent. This is not a straightforward question or answer. I see a lot of people very confident in their answers as to what the best decision is. The reality is there's an emotional attachment to your family home. There are a whole lot of people that just don't want to move out of it. I can tell you my parents are empty nesters, have been for a long time, and their house is way too big for them, but they're not moving. And it's not logical, but they're not moving regardless. So in terms of using the equity in your home, it doesn't really fit into their retirement plan because they're not going to see it.
Right.
I think it was going to go to my brother. So like that's the plan. The house is going to him.
Right.
For me, I sold my house in December. I'm very comfortable with it. I have friends that say, why are you doing that? I didn't want to deal with the lawn. I don't want to deal with the roof repairs. I don't want to deal with changing the furnace. I don't want to shovel. So I took advantage of this crazy market and I'm very comfortable renting for a while. I will probably go back. If I'm going into retirement and I'm going to spend a lot of time in Florida when things go back to normal, I don't want to have to worry about maintenance and upkeep of my property. So maybe renting's better for me, or maybe a condo is better for me. But it's all very individual. Is there math involved? Absolutely. But that math only works if you can access it, and if it's inside your home, do you really want to do that?
Right.
Or do you even need to do that is a better question.
Yeah. And I often get asked that question a lot. Should we buy something or should we rent? And it really does. There is no yes or no answer. It really depends on the person's situation, their retirement plans, where they're at financially, what makes better sense for them. So those types of questions I always refer to, go see your financial planner, go have a conversation, and do the math like you keep saying. But it's a very important perspective to have. And so not an easy yes or no question. It really all depends on how long, like there's so many variables there, right? So
right. And the most common thing I hear is, well, my house is going to appreciate in value, which is true, it does, and I'm going to have all that money in there. Well, if you're never planning on leaving your home, that money's not necessarily going to help you in retirement. Right. Yes, there's mortgages. Yes, there's stuff you can do for sure, but that's not what everyone wants to do. So really on this one, yes, there is math involved, but what do you want for your life and what do you want your lifestyle to look like? And how does that affect you down the road?
Right. Right. Awesome. Any other questions, anyone who's on the call at all, or any other topic that we haven't talked about that you have a question about? Please feel free to pick Callum's brain.
There's still a little bit left.
All right. No more questions? Crickets. Okay, so I have put in your information, Callum, on the chat. If you guys have any questions that you didn't want to share here online and want to reach out to him, he'd be happy to help. if you can't find him, let me know and I'll put you in touch. Yeah, so I think that was a really good session. And again, he could have spent all day talking about stuff because there's so much, but I just wanted to touch on a few things and, you know, spark some food for thought for you guys and, you know, go from here and talk to your folks or, you know, talk to your family about things. And it can be a very stressful part of the whole process, but it can also be planned and managed well if everyone's on the same page and everyone's having open and honest conversations. So
yeah, as far as the stress goes, just I'll make the analogy to my son and having the sex talk.
yeah.
As uncomfortable as that sex talk is now, it would be much worse if he came home and someone was pregnant.
Right. Yes.
So yes, the financial conversation is uncomfortable. It's much more uncomfortable when you're going through a grieving process when you don't have answers.
Right. Right.
You're going to have one of the two conversations.
Right.
Having it now is much easier, and that's my main message today, is just have the conversation and have some sort of plan and make sure everyone knows who's involved, and make sure you involve your lawyer, your finance person, and your accountant to sort of help you get through it, because no one has all the answers.
Right. And do you ever sit with sort of families? Can like a family come to you, all 3 or 4 or 5 people, and you know, kind of have you walk them through all options type thing? Does that
Absolutely.
happen? Yeah.
That whole family meeting, that would be great to sit through.
Yeah.
Because then and that sort of goes to how I feel about my role, which is I feel like I'm sort of the conductor, because I'm going to pull information from the accountant. I'm going to talk to the lawyer with or for you, depending.
Right.
And maybe it's a conversation with the children as well, if it's allowed. Allowed is a big part of it, the privacy of it. It's how do we pull it all together so everyone's on the same page going forward. And then when things do happen, there is 0 surprises.
Right.
And then when there's no surprises, all we have to deal with is the grief.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part.
Yeah. Because I'm sure there's a lot of misinformation out there too, right? So having everyone in the same room where, you know, Brother Bob is saying one thing, Sister Sally is saying, no, that's not true, this is true. Well, what is fact and what is fiction, right? So that would be a very useful time spent. Okay, if there's nothing else, guys, thank you so much for today. I have been recording it and I will send it out. So please share with anyone that you'd like to share it with. And next week is our last session, and it's going to be with our lawyer expert. And so he'll have lots of great information as well. Colin, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
And I will talk to everyone next week. Have a good one. Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
You too.